She can hear us.
Ah.
Recorded live.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you're listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable podcast. This is podcast number 649. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me today, I have no co-host, but hey, I'm here with a guest, and we're going to be talking to Shank Mohan. I think I got that, but we'll hear what his last name is because I never get him right. But before we get to Shank, let's talk about what's actually happening in the news. So in the news, today is Wednesday, June 15th, 2023. And what we were just talking about is obviously Explore. Explore's coming up. I think we're doing a week to Explore now in Vegas. I think it's like 8 weeks left, something like that. 8 and change. So excited about what's coming up. We've got the community hub all lined up. We've got theaters. We've got the Code Theater. We've got the community V Brown Bag, VMTN Theater. A lot of the sessions are up on Content Calendar right now, so you can go search for Code, search for VMTN. You'll see all the community sessions that are out there right now published, so we're excited about that. In the vExpert news, there is a call for what Explore means to you, a $50 gift card for those of you who do it that we like your blogs. So we're going to be giving away some $50 gift cards for blog articles. Again, what you like about VMware Explore. Articles submitted will be voted on by vExperts, and the winner will receive a $50 Amazon gift card. Late submissions email to Corey C. Romero at VMware.com. So Corey's running a contest, getting some blogs out, getting some activities for Explore. Excited about that. Excited about content calendar being up. We're going to be adding some more additional content. The Code Labs should go out next week. So a lot of activity going on. Should be a great event. Again, Vegas, always cheap to get there. The conference fee itself, obviously a little more expensive, but hopefully you can scrape up some dollars and come by and check us out. We are going to have a really cool village, and I'm looking forward to it. With that, that's about it for the news. So let's get to our main topic, which is, what is our topic? VMware NSX multi-tenants. Unveiling true tenant solution with Shank. He has a blog article out on his blog called, the blog is lab2prod.com.au. I think he's out of Australia. We'll hear that next. So Lab2Prod, that's his blog, and we're going to be talking to him about a blog article that actually started to trend in social a little bit. And he takes us through NSX multi-tenancy. I think that's what we're going to be talking about, and true tenant isolation. So Shank, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in IT, how did you get here, and where do you work these days?
Yeah, no worries. I'll reintroduce myself, Shank Mohan from Australia. I actually work for VMware as part of the VCN SE team. So I've been with VMware for about 4 years. Prior to this, I was the ANZ practice lead for professional services and then a senior consultant at some point. Prior to that, about 10 to 12 years, I've had a mix of private and public, that's federal government experience, which has really led me to where I am currently. And I have been working in the network and security space for pretty much the entire time of my IT career, outside of the first few years being a typical help desk guy and working my way up the ladder. Yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Nice. And Australia, which city in Australia? Did he mention that?
I'm in the capital. I would like to let you to guess where that is, because a lot of people get this one wrong.
Let's see. It's not Brisbane, right? So
100%
not Brisbane.
Starts with a C?
No. I don't know. What's the capital?
Canberra. I'm in Canberra.
Canberra. It's Canberra, right? Canberra.
Canberra. CANBER.
Okay. All right. Canberra. Yeah. I've been to Australia once and went up on the Gold Coast, went into Brisbane, and then went up north. Beautiful beach up there, beautiful countryside. So I got to say that when I was there, I was like, it was a country that I felt like I could move there and have a better life, right? There are very few countries that I go outside the U.S. that I go, oh, this is just way better, right? Like, but Australia is one of them.
What do you like about it? Nice and laid back?
Yeah, just laid back, beautiful rolling hills. beautiful ocean, beautiful beaches. Everybody's super nice, right? Like laid back, nice, right? Go have a beer at the pub, play some pool, whatever. Like it's just a really laid back, clean, friendly country all around. So yeah, that's what I liked about it.
Definitely.
Yeah, and beautiful. Yeah, beautiful place.
Should definitely come back. When were you here last?
Oh, probably 20 years ago, right? Like a long time ago. 2000. Early 2000s. Yep. Time flies by. So you're a blogger, right? So you're obvious SE, right? You get into security. Obviously networking, you hear NSX multi-tenancy, I think networking, but the reality is multi-tenancy is all about, security and domaining and, keeping things separate. How long have you had your blog? How long have you been blogging? How often do you blog?
It all started probably somewhere in the peak of COVID or just at the beginning of COVID. And it was really a means to sort of pass the time. At the same time, I was writing a book on NSX as well. So it was sort of going hand in hand so I could share my interests, as well as I also started the same sort of thing for YouTube. So about 3 years, I tried to get an article out every month or so, maybe thereabouts. Sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less. Especially with the baby out now, I don't think I'll be doing anything except for diaper changes for a while. So it's going to be a little while before I get back to blogging.
Yeah, that can happen. We can go through times of, high productivity, and then times of, medium productivity, and then times of no productivity, right? And yeah, that happens. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about VMware NSX and multi-tenancy. So multi-tenancy has been around a long time, right? Like, so I assume this is just moving the needle forward, but let's talk about networking and multi-tenancy and so how did we get where we are today?
Yeah, so I mean, if you take a bit of a brief history, so back when NSX was first incepted, and then we went to NSXV, then NSXT. NSXV was highly integrated with vCenter, and then as we went into NSXT, there was no true multi-tenancy. So the way people got around that was you'd have a provider T0 gateway, which is just creating a T0 with an edge cluster, and then have individual tier 1 gateways, or you could separate that one more further by creating a separate T0 with its own tier 1s to carve out what tenancies you want. But that, in the end of the day, didn't give true multi-tenancy, because you could still have access to everyone else's equipment or whatever you want, logical constructs, your gateways, your segments, your products, policies, all that sort of stuff was still visible to everyone. And what that meant was, whilst, yes, you could probably create principal identities, which was a really messy way of doing things to give people specific access to things, or roles specific access to things, it didn't really give the segregation that people wanted, and people would still be able to go in and see everything in NSX. So what happens now is, when you go into NSX, you can create a new project, and then people within that project that are given specific rights to that project will only be able to see what's in their project. So if I logged into NSX, and let's say I call it Shank's project, if I was only given project admin access to Shank's project and no other global type of role, say auditor or enterprise admin, I will only be able to see what is exactly in my project. But as of now, the constructs are tier 1 gateways, stuff like NAT, we've got policy, we've got tags, all that sort of stuff is good. In the future, I can't comment on when exactly this is going to be. We're going to have things like a VPC-like architecture, which would make it feel more cloud-like and ready-like for that sort of thing.
So in the land of NSX, what version are we at right now? I'm trying to think. 4.1. And when did this multi-tenancy get introduced? I think your article has it. You can guys go read the blog, but I'll just ask you right off the top.
Yeah, so it was around 4.0 that it came out as part of API only ingestible, and then in 4.1 it was UI driven as well.
Okay, so they added it in 4.1 in the UI, right? And so that's where it became in. When you're working in customers, are the customers that you're working with, are they typically cloud providers? Are they, on-prem cloud enterprises that just want to have job separation and, separation for security purposes across multiple organizations or groups? Where do you see this uptick at the beginning?
Yeah, so my main customer patch is FSI, so banking sector essentially. And yeah, so you're right. They do have a mix of hybrid cloud or multi-cloud, if you want to call it that. But for their on-prem, especially, there are some major banks that have various teams with different roles and rights and responsibilities. So they would typically create projects for different wings, as you said, or organizations or departments, if you will, that have their own teams that need to be able to do what they need to do in their environment without giving them, I want to call it, God access to the rest of the environment. Because once you're in a project and you're been assigned to a project, you don't get access to stuff like the system tab. You get limited or some visibility of planning and troubleshooting. So that way you can only really troubleshoot your own tenancies.
So when you're creating the projects, I assume some master admin has to come in and then create the projects, and then define the components in the project, and then give role-based access control to those project administrators, right? That then have that view.
Correct. Yeah. So say I'm the enterprise admin, I'll come in, I'll go in and go to manage projects. I'll create Shank's project, and then I can either from that point on assign users and with their roles and permissions, or I can do it through the user management pane. And then from that same spot, you can also assign quotas to the project, because as an overall system of NSX, you still have hard limits that you need to abide by. So we're talking about maximum amounts of firewall policy, VNIC per rule, and T1 gateway segments, all that sort of stuff still needs to be adhered to. So as you're carving out these projects, you still need to be mindful of everything that you're assigning to projects. So you can assign quotas, but let's say my project will only have 2 segments. The moment I hit that segment limit, there'll be an overall overarching warning or an alarm in the system saying this tenancy has reached the limit, and they won't be able to do any more with that. So that's essentially how you would manage the project and the user roles going forwards. And then also with user mappings, similar to NSX, you can do LDAP, VIDM, and local users.
Nice. I gotta say, your blog article is very complete, right? Because you take us through the screenshots to create a project, right? So it's like, It's nice to be able to come in and see, okay, this is how I do it. This is what I'm doing. You're highlighting, what projects, the name, how to engage with the GUI. How friendly is this? I mean, it's kind of hard to ask you that because you're an SE, right? But when customers traditionally do this on their own when they're implementing this? Is this something that we have SEs come out and help customers with? What's the expected use case of this?
So if you've gotten to a stage of where you're using NSX fairly easily and it's in your environment and you know what you're doing, this is not a long string. So you can actually just click down and create a project, and it's the exact same UI. As the project admins and all that sort of stuff, if they've had NSX experience, they can easily just go in and create great gateways and hit the ground running. But if you haven't touched NSX before, it may be a little bit confusing, but it's rather than a project or a tenancy thing, it's more of just an education, get your head around NSX type of situation.
When people are implementing this, though, implementations are not that easy, right? You have staging servers, you have test and dev servers, you're not going to do this in production. First off, you're going to probably go set a test network and test some of this stuff. So when you're building, but then I go multi-tenancy. The whole point of multi-tenancy is to have things in production running, and then I'm going to create a new one. So this stuff has to be fairly reliable, because you're going to be doing this, creating a new project in production, right? The idea of having another tenant is to do this in production.
Yeah, you could also, people may not do it this way, but you could also create a tenancy which would be test, dev, and prod. So it's a single instance of NSX if you don't have the hardware or the resources or the infrastructure just in general to be able to do that. That's one way you could do it. But at this point in time, because multi-tenancy came out in 4.1, I would make the assumption, unless you're a brand new adopter of NSX and hardware and whatever you want to call it, your on-prem cloud, you probably already have the physical infrastructure to be able to do this. So yeah, you could get your head around it in test or dev, and then push it into prod. If you do it directly into prod, I'm always a fan of doing things in test and dev first. And typically, even the smallest amount of features, even just rolling upgrades, for example, big banks will always test it first before going to production. So this is no different. It's just another feature you're going to enable. So you want to make sure you got your head around it.
Yeah, head around it before you take it out into production. Yeah, and everybody's doing that, so that makes sense. It is fascinating to see quota management and talk about quota management for a little bit. So you have a table of the quotas, networking, security, and inventory, which is kind of like, the 3 pillars of quotas, right? I don't know if there's anything interesting in quotas other than what happens when you overrun quotas, right? Or, I've got a project and I've got some quotas. Does it flag, when an instance is, getting near to quotas and set alerts or other things like that?
Yeah. So as of now, it's not as it's nearing. So there's no threshold violation. It's more of you've hit the limit and it goes into an alarm in the dashboard saying this tenancy has breached, let's say, like I said before, you've got 2 segments quota allocated to you. If you hit that 2, it's going to alert. And then in the tenancy itself, you're not going to be able to create any more segments.
Right. That makes sense. Got that quotas, and you have a nice set on that, and it makes sense. Everything there is actually quite nice. Creating a tier 1 gateway, add the tier. It looks pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
One
thing to remember though, the tenants do not manage the tier 0 gateway as of now. When you're creating the project, you assign the edge cluster and the tier 0 gateway to the project, and then when you create a tier 1 gateway, it's linked to that tier 0. So you're not mucking around with BGP, uplink interfaces, all that sort of stuff. That the physical network is done by the enterprise admin, and the tenant or project administrator is just dealing with their tenancy.
Yeah, he just gets assigned his connection, and then he can just use it, right?
Correct.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense there. All done in software these days, right? Like it is that. I'm just looking. Creating network pools, policy objects. What's a policy object?
So a policy object is essentially anything that can be assigned to a policy. It could be the policy as in the firewall rule itself. It could be a tag. It could be anything in the inventory. It could be a service, anything like that.
When you're creating an object, how do I create an object and assign object parameters to the objects? I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so if you jump into, let's say if we go to distributed firewall policy and let's call it test firewall, we give it a default deny or a deny. You can go in and then assign source and destinations, which could be a VM, it could be a group, could be any object that you've created for, let's say, services as well, or a segment, a port, all that sort of stuff can fit into there. And then you've got your context profiles that you can also assign, which within there you can also specify ports, protocols, if you're using layer 7 app IDs, all that sort of stuff.
And then I see you can have a pool of them, and then you can share them amongst different projects, right? So
yeah, correct.
They access resources. So why they're objects is because they're defined, and then you can share them, right?
Correct. Yeah. So for example, if I was the enterprise admin and I didn't want to specifically manually share, let's say, a DNS server, which is an object with every tenancy or a segment with every tenancy, what you could do is, as the enterprise admin, when you're creating the project, or you go into your inventory, you go to resource sharing, you say, I want to share this object with every project or specific projects if that's what you want. And then by default, when the project admin logs in, they'll have access to whatever it is that you've shared.
Nice. I'm just going through your blog because it's fascinating to read this, and I would encourage everybody to go to lab2prod.com.au, and then I think it's on his front page, but you can search for VMware-NSX-multi-tenancy.html, and again, it's been trending in social, so that's also probably something you can Google and be able to find. Verify tenant isolation, right? So what is it? What does that do, and how do I know it has been verified?
So it's, again, just basically testing the logical constructs. So let's say tenant 1 and tenant 2, they should not be able to see each other unless they've got specific roles that cross-match and allowed to audit or view or edit each tenancy. So let's say I log into NSX, I should be completely isolated to what I've created in my tenancy. So tier 1 gateway segments, policy, whatever it is. And then let's say you log in. If you log in as your user, you should automatically be taken to your tenancy and not see anything in mine. And that effectively works as of now.
How do we guarantee, are there any test beds or any other, tools out there that would run to verify that you don't have bleed over, or you don't have, data getting from one tenant to another tenant? Are there kind of known ways to test this stuff?
So UI is probably the easiest way. You can also jump into the CLI. It's no different currently in the CLI, but as mentioned earlier, the future of multi-tenancy is going to bring in more constructs to further isolate everything and bring in more features to multi-tenancy. As of now, it's very policy-driven and logical object-driven, as opposed to data isolation. But in saying that, if you logged into one VM in, let's say, tenancy 1, and it had policy driven for it or created for it to not leave that tenancy, the other tenancy will not see anything in that. It's the same as currently in NSX or prior to multi-tenancy, where if you had 2 VMs with their own sets of policy, the DFW or whatever it is that you've created will not allow it to communicate unless specifically allowed to do so.
Nice. I'm looking at the tenant alarms, operations, and logging, right? I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward, right? You know, you can look at your alarms. You have a nice GUI here that kind of gives you, you know, behaviors. There's a logging section. What's interesting about this? Is there any interesting when you were using this? Do you go, oh, this is nice? Any features that you kind of recommend?
So the logging is definitely useful, because if you're doing some troubleshooting and you've got 100 tenancies and there's actually no hard limit on how many tenancies you can create, backtracking what is the problem and which tenancy and actually just trying to find logs for a specific tenancy is going to be a nightmare, because one, you've got the base system-wide logs, then you've got each tenancy's logs as well. If you don't properly tag and log them, then you're going to have a challenging or a tough time trying to understand what is where. So if you tag, let's say my tenancy with Shank's logs, and then I go into, let's call it log insight, because I would shuffle all my logs to any logging system, search for Shank's logs, and everything in my tenancy should, in theory, show up. And then you can backtrack from there and do some troubleshooting. In terms of alarms, it's just a global dashboard, an alarms dashboard. So based off the tenancy, alarms created or whatever's generated will show up in the alarms. So the enterprise admin can see it and the project admin can see it as well.
Nice. When we talk about roles, like I'm thinking about who actually, you know, how many people would have to manage your multi-tenancy kind of network environment, right? To make sure that, you know, I had enough resources here, because one of the things I see is this is nice. I set it up and then I go away and I don't look at it for a year and a half, right? And then I realize I got some kind of issues or I haven't really been paying attention. In a team where you're trying to manage an enterprise, how many people would actually pay attention to this? Is this like a one-person job? Is this a multi-person job? How does this span out?
Yeah, so that's actually that's a common question we get, because adoption is people are always, it's your job, it's your responsibility sort of thing. But it works better when you've got a combination of people, because you need the VI admins to manage the platform. You likely need someone from the networks team to manage the networks, because the VI admins are always, I don't touch networks, so the networks team have to do that, so they'll need their own role for that. Then security admins will also want to get in and have their 2 cents about what needs to be configured in terms of policy. So right off the bat, you've got 3 there. Then you might have others that need to come in and audit and all that sort of stuff. But definitely it'll be a mixed bag of resources. So it's not just it's not going into one person, and if that person leaves, it's not a single point of failure.
Yeah, I guess it would have to be the network engineers, right? That are they're paying attention to this and setting this up, right? It's kind of this gray area where you're doing multi-tenancy, but you want to have your network set up, but it's in software. It's very close to compute, and so it's like, who actually pays attention to this? Who's running it?
Correct.
Yeah,
it's sort of a learning curve, right? Because the network guys don't want to touch anything in the virtual world, or most of the time don't want to touch anything in the virtual world. The virtual world doesn't want to touch anything in networking world, so they need to get on the same page sometimes. Sometimes they're happy to do it and they're willing, and that's usually where I've seen the most success, because they adopt as many features as possible and they are able to hit the ground running, and really they'll take a swing at anything that gets thrown at them, and they'll be able to deal with it. Whereas people that are having a lot of infighting and aren't able to get on the same page, they typically struggle with demarcation of roles and responsibilities. So that's where that learning curve comes in, and they're like, who does this, and they log tickets and they don't speak to each other, and it just sometimes causes a bit of a mess.
Yeah, I can see where, you know, you would, you know, this gets me back to adoption of this, right? Like, and actually using it. I get it. If you're a cloud provider, you have to do this by its very nature, right? You have to have everything isolated. When you're in a big, large, multi-department company, right? Or multi-BU company, these are nice to do things, right? But the world is going to fall apart, but it is leaving you vulnerable to cross attack. Somebody gets in one business unit, the next thing you know, they're crossing into domains and creating havoc in other places. And you've got outages in, you know, $1 billion businesses, right? And banks obviously don't need any of that. So I guess in the standard corporate world, I would guess industries adopt putting energy into doing this, where you don't need multi-tenancy. It's just a really good practice to do it, right? How do you see this rolling out in the enterprise? Obviously, banks and federal government, maybe that's what you're with. You're saying, I would assume they're leading edge, where they're going to pay attention to this and do this. But I could see where this is valuable for any, enterprise business that wants to make sure they're isolating things just from a security perspective and a proper operation perspective. Where do you think we are on this? Obviously it's out how long now? Maybe less than a year?
Yeah, roughly. I mean, if you're talking about API driven versus UI, it's probably less than a year, but for a combination of both is probably 1 to 2 years, somewhere around there. Okay. But in terms of where the enterprise would see this, you could probably, it may not be the best approach, but you could also sort of map this back to have a look at the environment and look how they've created their environment. If they've got 100 tier 1 gateways trying to separate different functions of the business, will that benefit from multi-tenancy? Have a checkbox or run a quick workshop to understand if that is what they need and what features they want. If it checks the boxes, then maybe it's a good approach to move those tier 1s into a tenancy so they're isolated and people can manage them individually. It also depends on how the IT team is structured. Are they global? Are they central? Are they distributed? It all depends.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Different companies. When we talk multi-cloud now, right? Like now I've got things on-prem. I'm starting to do workloads off-prem or in clouds. Does this address some of that as well?
So it's an on-prem solution for NSX on-prem. It's all still API ingestible. There's no difference to how we would treat it in terms of, let's say you've got VRI provisioning workload across multi-cloud or on-prem and off-prem. If you wanted to do the same with multi-tenancy, you can. It does have API endpoints where you can just go and provision whatever it is to be able to tightly integrate with your distributed application architecture if you've got on-prem and off-prem. That all works still. There's no difference.
Nice. As we come into this section, I always ask, where do you think everything is going, right? So obviously this is a big leap forward, right? Because this is a whole GUI that we introduced it with APIs. Now we're introducing it with a full GUI environment that brings it to everybody that knows how to use a mouse. Where do you think this technology is going in the industry?
So I would suggest, if you've ever used something like AWS as your any cloud provider essentially, and you can see how their VPC constructs, their logical networking constructs, how everything is fairly isolated unless you know how to merge them and how to use them independently. That's how it is by default. I would suggest that's where this is going to go in the future, because yes, you can have tenant isolation through logical constructs, but you probably also want to have the networking constructs. So at the moment, what is a bit of a gotcha is, let's say you've got two different tenants creating tenancies, for lack of a better word. You've got tenant A creating a segment in 192.168.0.0/24. There's nothing currently stopping the second tenant from creating the exact same segment with the same IP range. So we need a way to be able to control that and make that better. So VPCs in the way networking is dealt with in multi-tenancy is something that is coming in the future.
Nice. Have you scanned content catalog for Explore yet? Are you thinking of maybe getting to explore Europe? Do they let you get off the island? I guess I call it the continent.
Less than VMware letting me. I think it'd be more my wife letting me now that we've had a newborn in the last 2 weeks. It's probably not going to happen.
This is true. And we are doing the podcast at an odd time so that we wouldn't create ultimate havoc. And I should loop back and say, was it a boy or a girl? And, and is this your first one?
First one, and it was a boy. And hopefully in less than 18 years, I won't have to work anymore.
Yeah, you won't have to work anymore? Yeah, okay.
Offload duties to the kid.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. Yeah. That having a 28-year-old, a 30-year-old, and a 25-year-old, and a 21-year-old, you never stop working. You're going to work for the rest of your life. My daughter is getting married in Napa next year, and a good wedding costs $100,000 now. So, you just keep going. It'll keep you busy. I have 4, so I have 4 kids.
No, as in like you said, 100 grand for a wedding. How many guests would you have?
That's 150. Yeah. 150
Jeez.
guests. Yeah. And I was actually being nice. I didn't want to actually say the real cost. It's more like 150, right? Like I was just trying to keep it so that people listening to this don't go, oh my God, Eric, well, those people in California are crazy. But it's gonna go up, right? It's gonna be a 125, 130. We got flower quotes for $10,000 just for flowers.
Jeez. You should do a destination wedding in Asia. I had like 20,000 people in my wedding. I can't say it was anywhere near that cost.
I did. My oldest son got married, and we had it in Wisconsin, right? In Milwaukee, and we got the whole country club, everything out the door for I think it cost $22,000 total, right? So the difference between going in Midwest America versus California, up in wine country, It is an expensive place to have that. So that's good. So you're not going to get out of the office. You're not going to go do some the VMworld, the Explore sessions. What else are you going to do the rest of the year besides raise a kid? I guess that's good enough, right? Like any other big plans?
I'm currently on pat leave until the 24th of July, and then we're probably going to head off to India at the end of the year. But in between, I've still got my VCF Fundamentals series to finish off on YouTube. I'll continue blogging where I get some time and really just enjoy the time with my baby, I guess.
Oh, that sounds good. You can't go wrong with getting some time off. Let's go back to your blog for a second. And you do have NSX, you do have VCF, and you have others, and you have a home lab. I always like to do a drive-by and say, like, okay, you got a lab architecture. Do you actually have a home lab?
Yeah.
What do you run?
It all runs in an off-prem DC, so I don't have to chew up my power.
Yeah. I do the same thing. So a buddy of mine gave me space in a cage, right? And it's a pain because you got to go drive down to the cage every once in a while. But you don't have to pay for the power. You don't have to have the noise. You don't have to have the heat. So
correct.
It works. But it is your own thing. What are you using as for CPUs or a main compute engine?
So I've got I've got 8 main hypervisor hosts, 2 VCF regions, and they're consolidated regions, and I've got 3 NASs, but that are all custom built. They're all true NAS with secondary storage. Then upstream, I've got 2 top of rack switches that are running layer 3 routing, and then above that, I've got a core switch, which is Juniper SRX. Then I've got 2 WAN connections. I've got an inbound Sophos for VPN, and then I've got Velo Cloud.
Yeah, and you do have a nice. If you go to Home Lab, if you go to his blog, Lab2Prod, he has a nice Home Lab tab that has a nice diagram of it, right? And I got to say, it's very network heavy, right? You got to.
Told you.
yeah. I was going to say, okay, yeah, this guy's into networking for sure. VMware SD-WAN Edge, like pretty nice, nice stuff. Any possible improvements in the future?
Yeah, look, I'm trying to add another NAS in, and I'll probably end up. I always cycle through the hosts because every time we release software, something gets outdated, and I've got to deal with either unsupported CPUs or make them supported in a unkind way. So I'll try to upgrade my hosts every once in a while. We've got a it's called All Bids, which is essentially a local company that auctions off ex-federal government equipment. So there's a lot of good deals on there sometimes. So a lot of people in Australia get on the back of that. If it's not eBay, eBay's a bit more expensive. So yeah, cycle through the hardware. I might upgrade the switches in some point in time. That's about it, really.
Yeah, I was going to say, you must pick this hardware up on secondary market, because I'm looking at your diagrams and I'm going, this is like $250,000 worth of gear here that you must have bought at at a discount of 10 cents on the dollar to get.
Yeah, I reckon the total cost is probably somewhere around maybe 12 to 15 AUD, KAUD.
Mm-hmm. What is KAUD? Is that your currency?
12,000 Australian dollars.
Australian dollars, 12K AUD. All right, yeah, Australian US.
Excuse the accent.
No, you just put it all together. So it's like, okay, KAUD. Yeah, perfect.
That's what happens when you've had 2 coffees in the morning and you've only been awake for 2 hours.
Yeah, but at least it's your Friday, so we can't complain with that. Do you get any access to any of the cloud providers to ever spend any time learning any of that? Do you have an AWS instance that's your own? When we talk about labs, one of the things that we're trying to figure out is how do we get the experts and others experience into the labs, into the cloud space without that costing them an arm and a leg. And I believe that VMware is going to offer VMware Cloud Foundation or AWS, what is it, VMC and AWS at a zero entry point, price where you just come in and you can get a single VM and they'll charge you for the VM usage. Versus right now, if you want to go do that VMC and AWS, you have to buy like a mini data center, right? There's a inbound, it's going to cost you $5,000 a quarter dollars in order to do that. Where I think they're going to announce coming up at Explore, they're going to announce some way to come in and just get a single VM and just build for the VM. But I'm just wondering if you get any experience in the cloud space, or do you just rely on the companies that you're, doing SE work for to get you that experience?
So certain teams within the organization, as in VMware, do get their own instances. I don't specifically have that, but sometimes I piggyback off someone else's and get some hands-on experience. But you've also got some free tiers. So as I think it's $200 credit, however long that lasts, depending on what you run up. You just got to be careful. Then AWS, you've got free tier as well. So you can log in and have a look around and all that sort of stuff. But if you want to run anything mean, then you're gonna have to pay for it. Unless you've obviously got an organization or a tenancy that's provided to you.
Yeah, that's right. It is one of the challenges we're working on solving. So I just wondered if, otherwise home lab is the way to go, right? Let's talk about your YouTube channel for a second. And I assume the YouTube channel is lab to prod as well, right? Yep. And you've got YouTube videos out there. How many videos you got out on your channel?
It's around 20.
20 videos. Nice. You make any money on it yet?
No. I only do it as a hobby, and I keep getting questions about certain things. I make videos and blog articles to solve them so that I don't have to keep answering the questions.
What are you using to record? Do you record with your screen and yourself? What are you using to record?
Yeah. So I've got, I use OBS to screen capture, and then I use Camtasia to edit. And then I've got a 4K Panasonic GH5 that I use for video recording.
OBS. So you're screen capturing with OBS. And do you just OBS with the camera and then you in front of the screen with the camera, or do you do
the camera sits on a tripod, so it's not the webcam. Okay. Because the quality is not as great. So.
But you're capturing it through OBS at the same time.
Correct.
So you're just using OBS to create those videos, and anybody can really do that because OBS is free, right? You get a tripod of a camera, and you can sit and make a nice tech video. So many people blog, but very few people take that next step into making kind of an on-camera, blog, just taking you through the article, like what we've done here today, right? So if you're a blogger and you're listening, I would say go check out his Lab to Prod. He's got some nice video sets there, and he did it. You just heard it. OBS with a camera, a tripod, and that's it. Now you use Camtasia to edit, right? So Camtasia, that's a license. You gotta buy a license, I suppose, to that. But you can go get Adobe Premiere or anything else too. I guess any kind of editor that you want. I suppose you could use iMovie, which would be free. I just like looking at like how to get into building this YouTube videos, because you've got a really nice site. You got your YouTube channel here, and you've got nice content, and it does help to take people through the content by talking about it and letting you articulate it versus just reading it. And the reason most people don't do it is it's just they believe the level of investment of being in front of the camera. So I guess the question for you is, how long do you spend in editing?
So the biggest tip I will give is you will get better over time. It's not something that you will hit the ground running and you'll be start to finish without editing anything. But it also depends on what sort of post-finishing results you want on the video. If you want straight video, just screen recording and then go ahead, it shouldn't take you any time at all. You just need to edit out the ums, ahs, air gaps, all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
You probably could spend less, depending on how long the video is, of course, but 5 to 10 minutes to an hour to edit and then post it. Again, depending on what you want your end product to look like.
Yeah, It looks like your videos are only like anywhere from 4 to 9 minutes, right? Longest,
Yeah,
right? So, and you say an hour to edit that, right? So you film it, you take an hour to film it, you edit out the ahs and ums and pauses, and then an hour later you can upload it to YouTube.
Yeah, correct. And again, like as you move on, you get better. You want to do different things. You'll try different things. It's all relative to what you want.
When you're putting little kind of cute graphics, what are you using to put the graphics on this in the recording?
So if it's part of the screen grab, it'll be Camtasia. But if it's moving GIFs and all that sort of stuff, it'll probably be PowerPoint. And my wife is a PowerPoint whiz, so I don't do any of that stuff myself.
Right. Okay. There you go. Yeah. You won't be doing any videos for at least another 4 months.
Actually, I was trying to get onto one this morning, but my lab was broken, so I couldn't do it.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, it's interesting to experience your blog. It's interesting to experience your YouTube channel. Good to hear about what we're doing with multi-tenancy in the latest version, which is 4.1 of NSX. So, go check that out. If other people want to learn more about this, is there like a play, other than going to docs.vmware.com, is there other good resources to learn about what's happening around multi-tenancy and NSX?
I would always recommend hands-on, but if you need to read something about it or watch videos, either this video or I think there's some other blogs around. There's a live fire one from the API days, but yeah, just get your hands onto it, because you can read as much as you can read, but then at the end of the day, when you go to implement something, it's completely different.
Yeah. Final thing, you're in Australia. We live stream this on vBarbecue, and the reason we do this, we don't do any audio editing. We do a little bit with Audacity, where we'll, maybe fix something if something bad happened, right? Like we get an outage and we'll have to cut out 5 minutes of blank time. Maybe we'll add the footer on if the jingle doesn't show up right. But other than that, we don't do this. We do it every week, right? Come rain or shine, we try to put one out every week so that we're just moving content forward. We're getting guests in. We don't worry about quality. Sometimes the quality is really bad. Sometimes the topics are really bad. Sometimes the topics are amazing. But what we do try to do is just put stuff out. So I would have guessed that you would say the same thing. A lot of people got caught up on the quality of the work they're doing, and that, if you make it too hard, the likelihood that you're going to do more of them becomes less and less. And I think the failure mode for a lot of these people is that they make it so hard on themselves that they just don't do enough regular quality, regular quantity, not quality, regular content.
Yeah, correct. I mean, if you create your barrier for entry so high that you have so many hoops you want to jump through before you even get one out the door, you're never going to just step foot in the game. You just need to hit record, get going, and then it'll be an iterative approach to what you do.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we live stream on vBarbecue. Australia, do they do barbecue down in Australia? Well, I've heard this like put a shrimp on the Barbie before. I don't know if that's really just an American euphemism or they actually do barbecue down there. But if you do, what do you do, and what gear do you use to barbecue, and what's your favorite?
I'm a lazy guy, so I'll always go out to get someone to barbecue for me. I usually go to a grill place and pick up some ribs, some wings, and some steak. If I am at home, I will have a few beers and chuck something on the barbecue, but who knows what it ends up like. I end up eating it either way, though. Yeah.
I have found that I have now gotten better at paying attention to how long I leave stuff on the barbecue so that I don't burn it. And if you have thermometers, you have meat thermometers, and you read about it, you can actually do a pretty good job, right? But you have to pay attention. If you don't pay attention, you're going to eat burnt stuff mostly, right? So
but if you've had enough beers, it doesn't matter too much.
There you go. That is Shank's best advice. Just drink a lot of beer, then your barbecue is fantastic, no matter what you're eating. It actually is fantastic. Well, Shank, thanks a lot for coming up, getting up early in the morning in Australia, and coming in. Thanks for putting the lab to prod site together. It's really nice. I think it helps out a lot of people. Thanks for writing the book, NSXT, Logical Routing. So that's a great contribution to the ecosystem. We always love to have ecosystem content, creators on, just to showcase them and then say thank you, because without you guys, you gotta have a data center, you gotta have machines in rack to be able to figure all this stuff out. So appreciate it.
It's actually fun and pastime, so it's not a worry at all. I love doing it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, most of us do geeky stuff, and as long as you can stay ahead of your wife and make sure you're a good father at the same time, then yeah, it's good. There's always trade-offs. So
yeah, the
thanks a
first
lot.
book I'm going to read is the NSX book, so that way you can grow up, start with NSX.
You know what you're going to find is your children do not like to do what you want them to do, right? You know, like you got this hobby, you got all this stuff, and it's like they're like, "No, I want to be a trapeze artist," and you're like, "What? No, no." But hopefully, you know, a lot of people stay in family businesses. My oldest son is a hardware engineer. I love hardware, so he works at Roku as a hardware engineer. So we enjoy each other's time, and the biggest challenge is when they get married and have their own family, stepping back and not being the son and dad combo that you used to be, because you only get them. That's the other advice I would tell people, and I'm sure you've heard this, but you only get to be the father of where you're the god of that child, where you're basically creating the child for a very short period of time, like 10, maybe 15 years, compared to the amount of time you're going to have with that kid in a relationship, right? Like my son is 30, and now I've been in relationship with him as an adult since he's been 15 years old, right? We've been adult to adult. And you realize that you spend way more time as an adult with your child than you do as the boss or the dad. You're always their father, but make sure you focus on the good, solid relationship as an adult to an adult, and don't get over crazy about being the dad that needs to tell them how to do things, because that time of your time with your kids really goes by fast and then is over. And what you have is what you've created as an adult relationship. So that's my 2 cents. That's what I've found with all my kids. So. Yeah, there you go. Well, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. You have rest of your Friday. I hope turns out good, and everybody else, enjoy the weekend and go get yourself some barbecue.
Cool. Thanks for having me.